Hi, and welcome to today's Daily Chronicle. Today is Tuesday, September 9th, 2025. Rupert Murdoch buys out three of his children to seal fate of his media empire. Rupert Murdoch has pulled one final rabbit out of his hat. The 94-year-old media titan has ensured that his vast corporate empire, boasting Fox News, The Wall Street Journal, and The New York Post, among other titles, will retain its quintessential conservative identity after his death. Through a series of complex transactions, Murdoch and his son Lachlan, his intended heir, have struck a deal to buy out the shares of Lachlan's three eldest siblings, Prudence, Elizabeth, and James. Lachlan is now set to control both of his father's companies, Fox Corp and News Corp, and after the elder Murdoch's death. In recent years, James had become an increasingly outspoken critic of the direction of Fox News and other Murdoch news outlets, including the Journal of the News Corp's Australian papers. He particularly cited coverage of the January 2021 siege of the U.S. Capitol, Fox's support for President Trump, and the frequent disparagement of climate change on Fox and the company's Australian papers. Elizabeth and Prudence had also felt betrayed by the decision of Rupert and Lachlan to sue them, and James without warning in a probate court in Reno, Nevada, to try to sever them from any influence over the company's future. The old Murdoch family trust will be dissolved under terms of this settlement. A new one will be created, with Lachlan in full control. Murdoch's two youngest daughters, Grace and Chloe, from his third marriage to Wendy Dang, will be equal financial beneficiaries, but have no say. Murdoch divorced Dang in 2013. To help fund the payments, the Murdoch companies are selling shares currently worth more than $1.4 billion. That means the percentage of voting shares held by the new family trust has been diluted from roughly 40% to around 1/3 in both Fox Corp and News Corp. News Corp and Fox Corp declined comment for themselves and Lachlan and Rupert Murdoch, citing the pending transaction. A spokesperson for James Murdoch similarly declined comment. And representatives of the other siblings could not be reached. The settlement had been a long time in coming. James had been Lachlan's chief rival for corporate control for a generation, and he has been restive about the abilities of Lachlan to lead their family's companies into the future, without the singular drive of their father. Robert Murdoch decided on Lachlan, who shares his conservative outlook. If anything, the son is considered more ideological than his father. Both men argue that after the media's mogul's death, the company would need stability in the top leadership ranks and consistency in its core conservative principles to retain loyalty of its audience. Under Lachlan and Rupert's leadership, the Wall Street Journal emerged as a financial powerhouse. Fox similarly has been a strong performer, yet the latter's reports and commentary have sparked a series of scandals in recent years. The latest involves a defamation suit from an election software company called Smartmatic. Fox stars amplified and embraced conspiracy theories that had helped throw the 2020 race to Joe Biden. The original family trust gave the 4 children from Rupert Murdoch's first and second marriages equal financial stakes and votes in determining their company's future. However, that was the condition set by Rupert's second wife, Anna, when he divorced her, allowing him to avoid having to hand over half his net worth to her. He instead paid her $110 million. The trust was irrevocable, yet Murdoch sought to have it revoked, erasing the reason for the trust in the first place. A Nevada state probate official ruled that Rupert and Lachlan had acted in bad faith. The prospects looked rocky on appeal. Rupert Murdoch has built a record and a reputation for ruthlessness. When things are dire, however, Murdoch also has a record of paying out. For example, Murdoch gave his 4 eldest children an extra $100 million when he decided to give Grace and Chloe an equal financial stake. Murdoch's British papers paid Hugh Grant and Prince Harry and 1,300 other litigants more than $1.5 billion to settle claims of people alleging phone hacking or other criminal intrusions of their privacy. Now, he has sued for peace by cashing 3 of his children out of the family business. But it is a brittle peace. James and Rupert almost never speak. Cancer stole her voice. AI, curse words, and children's books saved it. Sonia Satinsky sits at Crane Cove Park in San Francisco on March 25th. Satinsky was diagnosed with stage 4 tongue cancer and underwent surgery to remove her tongue, larynx, and other structures. She then worked with researchers to create an AI-generated voice using past recordings of her speech. When doctors told her they had to remove her tongue and voice box to save her life from cancer that invaded her mouth, Sonia Satinsky sat down with a microphone to record herself saying things she would never again be able to say. "Happy birthday," and "I'm proud of you" topped the phrases she banked for her husband and 2 daughters, as well as "I'll be right with you," intended for customers at the architecture firm she co-owns in Tucson, Arizona. Thinking about the grandchildren she desperately hoped to see born one day, she also recorded herself reading more than a dozen children's books, from Eloise to Dr. Seuss, to one day play for them at bedtime. But one of the biggest categories of sound files she banked was a string of curse words and filthy sayings. If the voice is the primary expression of personality, sarcasm and profanity are essential to Satinsky's. When you can't use your voice, it is very, very frustrating. Other people project what they think your personality is. I have silently screamed and screamed at there being no scream, said Satinsky in a recent interview, referring to rudimentary voice technology or writing notes by hand, with the literal you-know-what. Fighting invasive oral cancer at age 51 forced Satinsky to confront the existential importance of the human voice. Her unique intonation, cadence, and slight New Jersey accent. She felt her fingerprints of her identity, and she refused to be silenced. Sonia Satinsky uses an app on her phone to talk with her daughter, Ella Fuentevilla, at Crane Cove Park in San Francisco on March 25th. While her doctors and insurance company saved her life, they showed little interest in saving her voice, she said. So she set out on her own research and identify the artificial intelligence company that could. It used the recordings Satinsky banked of her natural voice to build an exact replica, now stored in an app on her phone, allowing her to type and speak once again with the full range of sentiment and sarcasm. She got her sass back, says Satinsky's daughter, Ella Fuentevilla, 23. When we heard her AI voice, we all cried. My sister, my dad, and I. It's crazy similar. Your voice is your identity. It took close to a year for doctors to catch Satinsky's cancer. She complained to her orthodontist and dentist multiple times about jaw pain and a strange sensation under her tongue. Then water began dribbling down her chin when she drank. When the pain got so intense, she could no longer speak at the end of each day. Satinsky insisted her orthodontist take a closer look. A shadow cast over his face. I saw it when he leaned back, she said. That look you don't want to see. That's when she started recording. In the 5 weeks between her diagnosis and surgery to remove her tongue, her entire tongue, and voice box in medical terms, a total glossectomy and laryngectomy, she banked as much of her voice as she could manage. Your voice is your identity, said Dr. Sue Yam, a radiation oncologist at UC San Francisco, where Satinsky got treatment. Communication is not only how we express ourselves and relate to other people, but also how we make sense of the world. When the voice is no longer available, you can't hear yourself thinking out loud. You can't hear yourself interacting with other people. Yam said it impacts how your mind works. People who lose their voice box, she added, are at higher risk for long-term emotional stress, distress, depression, and physical pain compared with those who retain it after cancer treatment. Close to a third lose their job, and the social isolation can be profound. Many laryngectomy patients learn to speak again with an electrolarynx, a small battery-operated box held against the throat that produces a monotonic mechanical voice. But without the tongue to shape her words, Satinsky knew that wouldn't work for her. Dr. Sue Yam, a radiation oncologist, stands with a radiotherapy system used to deliver precise, high-dose radiation treatments for cancer patients at the University of California, San Francisco's Mission Bay Medical Center on May 16th. When Satinsky had her surgery in January 2022, AI voices were still in their infancy. The best technology she could find yielded a synthetic version of her voice, but it was still flat and robotic, and others strained to understand her. She got by until mid-2024 when she read about tech companies using generative AI to replicate a person's full range of natural inflection and emotion. While companies can now recreate a person's voice from snippets of old home movies or even a 1 minute voicemail, 30 minutes is the sweet spot. Satinsky had banked hours in her children's book readings. Eloise saved my voice, Satinsky said. Now she wishes that she wants to say into a text-to-speech app on her phone called Whisper, which translates and broadcasts her AI voice through portable speakers. Sonia Satinsky often uses a portable keyboard using the text-to-speech software on her phone. Most doctors and speech therapists who work with head and neck cancer patients don't realize AI software can be used this way, Yam said. And with their focus on saving lives, they often don't have the bandwidth to encourage patients to record their voices before they lose them in surgery. Health insurance companies likewise prioritize treatments that extend life over those that improve its quality, and typically avoid covering new technologies until data proves their actuarial value. Satinsky and her daughter spent months wrangling with claims adjusters at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona, but the insurer refused to reimburse Satinsky for the $3,000 she spent on her initial assisting speaking technology. Apparently, having a voice is not considered a medical necessity. Satinsky kept her AI voice edged with sarcasm. Satinsky now pays the $99 monthly fee for her AI voice clone out of pocket. While health plans cover both routine and life-saving care, assistive communication devices are typically not covered, said Teresa Joseph, a spokesperson for the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona. As AI provides opportunities to impact health, we imagine that coverage criteria will evolve nationally. How research might lead to insurance coverage. Satinsky resolved to use her newfound voice to help others regain theirs. She stepped back from her work in architecture and built 2 websites detailing her voice banking journey. VoiceBankNo.com and gastrectomygirl.com. She tells her story at conferences and webinars, including an oncology conference in Denver that Yam organized for 80 scientists. One doctor who attended, Jennifer de los Santos, who was so inspired by hearing Satinsky's voice that she began laying the groundwork for a clinical trial on the impact AI technology has on patients' communication and quality of life. That type of research could generate the data health insurers need to measure actuarial value, and therefore justify coverage by insurance, said De Los Santos, a head and neck cancer researcher and professor at Washington University in St. Louis. Breast cancer survivors faced a similar battle in the 1980s and 90s. She added, insurers initially refused to cover the cost of breast reconstruction after mastectomy, calling the procedure cosmetic and unnecessary. It took years of patient advocacy and carefully crafted data showing reconstruction had a profound impact on women's physical and emotional well-being before the federal government mandated insurance coverage in 1998. Both De Los Santos and Yam said research data on AI voices clones will likely follow a similar path, eventually proving that a fully functioning, natural-sounding voice can lead to not only a better life, but a longer one. Sonia Satinsky has built 2 websites detailing her experience in voice banking and tells her story at conferences, including an oncology conference in Denver for 80 scientists. In recent months, Satinsky's AI voice literally helped save her life. Her cancer had resurged in her lungs and liver. Her voice allowed her to communicate with her doctors and participate fully in developing the treatment plan. It showed her just how medically necessary having a voice is. She noticed that doctors and nurses took her more seriously. They didn't tune out the way people often did when she relied on her more robotic synthesized voice. It seemed they saw her as more fully human. If someone can only communicate using a few words at a time and not elaborate and interface more fully, it's natural you can detect that they have more depth of thought, she said. Being able to dialogue with my care team in a more seamless way is vital. While doctors successfully treated her latest round of cancer, Satinsky, now 55, said she is confronting her odds in a new way, facing the reality that she will likely die much sooner than she wants. All over again, she realized how crucial her voice is for maintaining perspective on life and a sense of humor in the face of death. I tend to forget and think I am fine, when in reality, this is forever now. Emotionally, you start to get cocky again. And this was like, whoa, B, we ain't playing. This cancer is real, Satinsky said, typing her next phrase with a mischievous grin. Sarcasm is part of my love language. In the brain, a lost limb is never really gone. A new study finds that the brain does not appear to significantly rewire its map of the body after an amputation. A rare circulatory problem required Emily Weldon to have her left arm amputated 3 years ago. Her brain still thinks it's there. Most days, it just feels like I've got my arm next to me, she said. The perception is so compelling that Weldon had to train herself not to rely on the missing limb. When I first had the amputation, she says, I was trying to put my arm out to stop myself from falling. Now, a study of Weldon and 2 other people with arm amputations may help explain why they are living with phantom limbs. Brain scans showed that in all 3, the phantom hand representation is exactly similar to the pre-amputated hand representation. Even 5 years later, after surgery, says Hunter Scone, a postdoctoral associate at the University of Pittsburgh, who started the project as a doctoral student at the University College of London. The finding, which appears in the journal Nature Neuroscience, challenges decades-old research in monkeys and people, suggesting that after losing sensory input from a limb, the brain dramatically reorganizes the areas linked to that limb. I'm not sure the new study really negates that research, says Dr. Chris Sathian, the chair of neuroscience at Penn State Health, who was not involved in the research. But the plot thickens, which is always the case in science. Sathian and Schoen agreed the finding bodes well for people who rely on a surgically implanted brain-computer interface to control a prosthetic or robotic limb. The interface depends on the brain maintaining for many years the circuits once used to move an arm, hand, or leg. a brain map of the body. The new study involved 3 people who knew they were going to have an amputation because of cancer or some other disease. Researchers performed MRI scans before and after the amputation to look for changes in the somatosensory cortex. An area of the brain that maintains a detailed map of the body. When you touch something with your hand, a certain region is activated. Schoen says, if you feel something with your toes, a different region is activated. Before the amputation, participants in the scanner would move their fingers, allowing scientists to see which brain regions responded. Up to 5 years after the amputation, participants imagined moving their missing fingers. Earlier studies had suggested that after the loss of a hand, the brain would shift the borders of its body map. The area responding to the missing hand would shrink, while the neighboring area linked to the lips would expand. But that's not what the team found. There's no evidence that the map of the lips is changing, Schoen says, which goes completely against all of those old studies that suggest if you lose this body part, this region of the brain is going to completely reorganize. Earlier studies were limited because they compared the brains of people who had already lost a limb with the brains of typical people. The new study appears to be the first to look at the same person's brain before and after an amputation. Prosthetic arms and phantom limb pain. Like many people who've had an amputation, Weldon often feels pain in her phantom arm and hand. It's like a throbbing pain that becomes quite unbearable at times, she says. Sometimes it feels like her wrist is sore. Other times, it's like her fingers are cramping. Previous research suggested phantom limb pain was the result of the changes in the brain's body map. But the new study suggests it occurs because the map hasn't changed, and the brain is still expecting signals from the missing body part. Imagine if you have a nerve that was receiving a highly detailed information for the body, and suddenly now it's receiving some strange, atypical input, Schoen says. How the brain would deal with something like this? It must interpret the input as pain, he says. If so, he says the solution may lie in finding a new home for a nerve ending, rather than just leaving it exposed. An unchanging body map could be a huge boost for the emerging field of brain-computer interfaces, which can allow a paralyzed person to speak or move a robotic arm. Many of these interfaces place electrodes in the same area of the brain that maintains the body map, so they depend on the map remaining constant over many years. The new evidence for this offers a lot of hope for patients with neurological conditions, Sathian says. Emily Weldon isn't seeking a brain-computer interface that could control a prosthetic left arm, but she says it's helpful just to have a scientific explanation of why her missing limb still seems like it's attached and sometimes hurts. A lot of people don't realize that you can actually still feel the limb, she says, and they're shocked when I say I'm suffering from phantom pain. Weldon has been able to control the pain with electrical stimulation and a therapy that uses a visual representation of the missing limb. And she says the phantom pain is much less severe than the pain she felt when her arm was still there. Back then, the pain was so intense, I couldn't look after my newborn daughter, she says. Now she's back at work and able to help her kids get dressed and ready for school.